budget builds. I had a recent comment on my YouTube channel. Somebody asked me to build a car for $6,000. This is what I would do today. I've done a similar build like this in the past. The engine I picked was a D16. Doesn't really matter which one you're running. Any D16, I think the most common you can probably get a hold of today is a D16 Y8. As for the block, 75mm YCP pistons with P2PO I-beam rod, ARP head studs. I do recommend torquing these bad boys down to 80 foot-pounds. Bearings, we're going to be running King Racing bearings. I don't run ACL bearings anymore. I've had bad experiences with ACL race bearings. As far as head gasket goes, you're already in there. I wouldn't reuse what you got. Definitely get a brand new OEM head gasket if you're sticking with the stock bore. If you decide to go over, you're definitely going to have to take your block to the machine shop to do that, and then you're also going to have to get a new head gasket to match the new bore size. I would recommend going with Cometic. I ran Cometic, never had any problems. The oil pump, you don't have to replace this oil pump if it is OEM already. What I suggest everyone do with the D16s, especially the Y8s, because they have very thin oil ports. Porting and shimming the oil pump is going to be one of the better mods to do to these. Very cheap, very affordable thing to do. This is definitely one of those mods that I would highly recommend with building a D16 underboost. For intercooler wise, we're going to be running a 2.5-inch generic eBay intercooler. It'd be any Civic from 1992 to 2000. Kit is going to be the easiest overall and it's easiest to modify. 2.5 inches more than plenty to support anything up to 500 wheel horsepower, and with a D16 we're not really going to be going up that far anyways. We will be making a cut, basically replacing the blow-off valve flange. Recommend getting an aftermarket one. We have one right here. Basically you just cut the intercooler piping and splice this one in, and then you just order 2 extra black couplers or whatever color you decide. We will be running a 50mm V-band QR blow-off style valve. These are tile clones, super generic, but they work great, super simple. A 44mm tile clone. Once again, this is an MVR style. Machining has gotten a lot better. Obviously, when you open this up, clean out any of the metal shavings from the machining. These do come factory up to 14 PSI with both springs, so that's perfect for what we plan to do. A cast iron log manifold. Now, the only problems with these is that they have really short runners. That makes it highly likely you'll be making a little bit more torque. Great manifold. I've ran one of these myself. These are very capable of producing up to 400 wheel in this. For the turbo, this is kind of up to preference. The T04E, this is from Max Speeding Rods. I do like the quality of turbos that they make today. This is just the turbo that I picked, and with a 63 AR, you can actually take off the internal wastegate. You don't need this generic 10AN oil line and feed kit. There's no brand particulars with this. Just pick something that works. We will not be using the oil return bung. We will be using the Kinugawa oil return. You drill a hole in the pan, gasket on the inside, gasket on the outside, and it just pretty much bolts right up. Oil filter sandwich plate from GlowShift. You will be needing this to have an oil feed line to the turbo, and if you plan to run an oil pressure line to a sensor so that you can get oil pressure readings, that's also super good to know. Dump tube off the wastegate, you're going to want this. Rev9 makes a good one. I've ran their stuff. It's pretty decent quality and it's relatively affordable. We are running a 38mm flange on the manifold itself, having to get an adapter plate to match the 44mm wastegate flange on the manifold. Vibrant Performance flange. This is a 38mm to 44mm flange. The bolts don't get in the way. It's already cut. You don't have to modify anything. Just bolt it up and you're ready to go. You will be running an OBD2A to OBD1 conversion harness. Pick one that has the highest reviews on eBay. Do plan to run a Boost by Gear setup. We are buying a 3-port Mac Boost solenoid. This is a super easy, simple thing to set up. There are plenty of videos that will break this down for you. So if your ECU is not prepped for that, either do it yourself or pay someone else to do that. That being said, we also are going to be planning to run ethanol. You are going to need an ethanol sensor so that the ECU gets the readings and can make adjustments from there. Flex fuel sensor that GM makes you can use with this. This is what's recommended on the forums and it's what I've used personally. There is a deal that they combine the sensor and the plug for $20. You don't need to do that. There's already a plug you can buy separate for about $5, so save you some money there. 2.4K ohm resistor. You will be needing that. It's a part of the circuit. Unfortunately, you have to buy these in more than one, as you can't just buy one separately unless you go to DigiKey, but you're still paying the same price as you would if you had 10 blocks. 1300cc injectors. I've ran these personally. They are EV14 Bosch fuel injectors. Super solid part. You can't go wrong. Especially these are ethanol rated. We went 1300cc to give you a little bit extra room there. You're also going to need a fuel pump, AEM 340 liter per hour. The one that we picked is rated rated for E85, so you're super solid there. We will be getting a fuel pump rewire kit. Teachworks actually makes a kit. It's basically just jumping an additional source and boosting that voltage so that the pump is getting the maximum voltage it needs in order to operate. All in all, the total bill that you will be ran is $2,466. This isn't including an ECU. What I suggest others to do is if you guys can get an Honda S300 V3 for anything no more than $800, I don't recommend paying more than that. Otherwise, you can do it yourself if you can source a chip and then you can chip an ECU that you decide to run. But you will need to run the V3 if you plan to run ethanol. As for the transmission goes, at a minimum, a stage 3 clutch from the brand Competition Clutch. Super good products. I've used their stuff multiple times. The flywheel, yes, they do have lightweight flywheels, but to be honest with you, the pros do not outweigh the cons in my mind. Drivability just absolutely tanks with something like this. If you have an OEM one, use the OEM one if it's in good condition. If not, otherwise I'd recommend still going with an OEM style brand. Luck or Luke, you can find these on Rock Auto, eBay, whatever. As far as transmission fluid goes, you can either use the Honda OEM stuff for the manual transmission, the Torco MTF. There's quite a few brands that make aftermarket racing transmission fluids, but I've been able to use the Honda OEM fluid and been just fine for me. It's a pretty solid setup. I think you're covered on a lot of grounds. Pretty budgety. There's not a lot of high quality parts here, but this stuff will get the job done and last a decent amount of time. The D16 is still, to this day, one of the most popular platforms to build, and I preach this. I've built one of these myself. The best route to go, these are in my personal opinion, the things to do if you plan to build a decent high horsepower D16 on a budget. If you do want to keep it in the budget, definitely try and find a chassis around $2,000, a little less than $3,000. That way you're still kind of staying on budget and you can afford additional things like tires, rims, whatever you do, whatever other additionals you need to do as far as repairs go for the chassis you decide to pick. Very affordable, very budgety, so nothing crazy here, but these cars are super simple to build, and these are what I recommend for picks for parts.